Too Late by Cirrus Sky. Paparazzi crowded the street, their obtrusive, intrusive cameras, flashing bulbs, large lenses pushing in as the press ponies jostled to get photos of the mayor who would be stepping out of the carriage. "It's raining buckets. How fitting," the gray mare in the carriage commented to herself. The stallion sat across from her, didn't hear, or at least chose not to respond. His job was to protect the mare from the vultures outside. He would be back in action in moments. As rain hammered onto the cobbles, washing around the hooves of the crowd, the carriage ponies forced their way through and around to the back of the building. Sturdy griffins held back the tide of flowing journalists. At the back entrance, the carriage halted, and the stallion hopped out, an umbrella in his magical aura. He led the mare out with a helping hoof and sheltered her from the rain. "I could have done with the water," she mused to herself. "A useful camouflage for tears." The thought prompted more rivulets of salty water to track down her face. She had given up trying to stem the flow or even dab it off. Taking one last look at the gray sky beyond the umbrella, wistful for the blue she had always enjoyed, she entered the imposing building. Inside, she was ushered away by the neatly dressed officials from the record label, from the personal protection company and those in charge of security for the city center complex. Signs and notices passed in a blur as the protective buffer of ponies made a current that the gray mare was pulled along by. Her mind, virtually shut off a mere 12 hours ago when the news reached her, was now closing itself further, scabbing over to protect her from the damage and give her time to heal, avoiding the reality of the situation she had been thrust into. It was ripped off and exposed to the truth she desperately wanted to avoid in short order. They had arrived at their destination, and her idle, fruitless search for blue skies had caused her to read a sign. ICU 1, Unicorn Ward. The typeface was bland and functional, the color neutral, and it proved to be psychologically undemanding. In the gray mare's mind, it was worse than the most shock horror poster ever designed. With that, everything she had sought to avoid rushed in. The sounds of silent suffering, the beep and hiss of machines that had to take up the slack in terribly damaged bodies, the muted speech of medical professionals and her entourage of protectors. Outside, the sound of falling rain and crowds of persistent, insistent press managed to penetrate the building. The sense of Royal Canterlot Hospital reached her too. From the inescapable cleaning fluids and cheap coffee to the smell of food for the more well that permeated the building. She stumbled on thin air and let out a cry. Her escort caught her before she hit the floor. He gave her a small expression of sympathy, offering his shoulder as support. His was not the shoulder she wanted, though. That was beyond the door they now faced. As the scrubbed stallion opened the plain door, the mare wanted to scream at him to stop, to just let her live in the world of before. A hoarse whimper was all that escaped her. More tears raced down her face. The door swung open, and her legs failed. It was a private room. The status of the patient called for that much. A hefty griffin guard glanced across from his station at the window. He nodded acknowledgement as the doctor and the visitor entered, only allowing the mare's assistant entry to help her in. The strong stallion carried her to the chair beside the room's only bed. She slid bonelessly into it, the tight control she had been maintaining cut by the sight before her. The patient was prone on the bed, back down on the mattress, with a light sheet laid up to her chest, wires leading away to a heart monitor. Her forelegs were laid over the sheet. A tube snaked from just above her hoof to a drip beside the bed. Her hair was stringy, more a mess than usual and bereft of the vibrancy it usually held. She was pale. She was always pale, being white-furred and mostly nocturnal, but now the gray mare could almost see through her coat and skin, transparent virtually, the deep blue lines of her veins tracing a network of life across her body. On the chair, the gray mare hoisted herself up to lay her head on the unencumbered leg. She couldn't bring herself to look to the left side of the bed-bound unicorn, the side swathed in bandages. "Final!" she breathed to the comatose mare in the bed. Every pony knew, in all of Equestria, that magic couldn't affect steel or iron. Their properties were anathema to the force that ran through all ponies. Equestrian-made iron and steel products had additional compounds or coatings to allow manipulation by the innate magic of unicorns, earth ponies, and pegasi. Things manufactured outside of Equestria didn't. Import conditions demanded that they were coated before use, but this could be expensive. The atmospheric rig was a piece from the Minotaur Principality. It had been bought in cheaply and given only a cursory inspection before installation. The control panel and loading doors had been treated for the magical manipulation. The superstructure and internal framework, hidden away and unchecked, had not. When the gig began, something had gone wrong. High volumes of gas from decaying dried ice had built up in a tank instead of bathing the crowd in mist. No pony noticed. The ice continued to decay. The pressure built up. Finally, the pressure exploded the tank, driving an untreated bolt out with a gunshot force. A basic unicorn magic shield cast by an out-of-shape DJ, more skilled in running a music rig, was no match for a solid steel bolt. Nor was flesh and blood. Octavia only half listened to the doctor speaking. She knew that her trusted guardian would relay it to her when she could bear to hear it. She understood the gist of what the medical professional was saying. The steel bolt had driven through fur, skin, muscle, bone, and organ, clear through Vinyl's upper left side. It had missed her heart by near molecular distance, brushing beside that vital muscle and the arteries that serviced it. Her lung hadn't been so lucky, punctured by the explosively propelled steel and peppered by shattered rib bone. The trajectory of the bolt sent it at an angle through her body, entering perilously close to her heart, through her lung, and out just above her left shoulder, cracking and chipping the bones at the joint and tearing a horrible exit wound. The gas that escaped, wrought a toll also. Carbon dioxide, inimical to life, had flooded the stage. For long moments, the stricken performer, body shocked by grievous wounds, was left to inhale the toxic gas, for it to seep within her wounds and cells. Vinyl would wake from the medical coma to labored breathing for weeks, and possibly limp for the rest of her life. But she had survived. Octavia thanked the sisters, thanked Harmony and Chaos and all things, that the stupid, vapid, vacant, perfect unicorn had held on to life with such tenacity. Thanked the moon and stars and elements that Princess Luna herself had been in the crowd, had taken stock of the accident and the injury, had used her power to seal the bleeding wounds and to teleport the mare from Stalliongrad Arena into the Royal Canterlot Hospital, using her authority in galvanizing the staff into action to treat the casualty. That the princess herself had then traveled across the city to an apartment only to find its occupant not present. That she had then personally tracked down the cellist to inform her about the situation had been beyond comprehension for the mare for some time. She had been leaving a practice session when the lunar D-Arc had caught her and broken the news. She had shut down then and there. The Lunar Guard had tracked down her agent, her elder cousin. He had stayed beside her since then. During the long hours, forced to remain home as the surgery was underway, escorting her through the gathered press outside the apartment building to the arranged carriage. Now he stood taking stock of the situation with the doctor while Octavia cried. "How much longer?" a whispering voice, her own, uttered. 2 days. We have to let her body heal and the magic flow through her in peace. The doctor had a kindly tone, and a gentle hoof to the gray mare's shoulder eased her worries a little. Some quiet time later, Octavia was curled in the chair, sleeping beneath a blanket. Close to Vinyl, close to the mare she hadn't told how much she loved enough. Octavia's sleep was more an exhausted collapse than an effort at rest. She had forced herself to stand vigil until fatigue had dropped her to the chair. She slept an entire day. So deeply she slept that the medical staff was unable to work around her without risk. They at one point even removed the patient for treatment and returned her to the room. Bass was glad to see his cousin sleeping. He had been unable to convince her right up until her sudden drop-off. Octavia woke to the sound of hard-won breaths and the light shuffling of a doctor and nurse. "Hey, Sleeping Beauty," the nurse smiled at Octavia. "We're just checking how she is without the oxygen mask." She rounded the bed to speak with the cellist. "If this goes well, we can remove the sleep spell." She smiled again as the gray mare, still muzzy from sleep, softly grinned. "So, she'll be okay?" Octavia spoke slowly. Her exhausted body had recharged, but her mind was slow to react. "Honey, if she's breathing okay, then she'll be good." The nurse turned back to work, and the doctor seemed to be having positive results. The pair left the room, and Bass came in. "Hey, Octavia. They told me you just woke up." He lowered his head, level with hers. "How long did I sleep?" "A day and a half, cousin. You were so worked up and awake so long that everything shut up shop at once." He nuzzled her lightly. "The doctor who was in here just now is fetching his colleague. They're going to wake Vinyl up." The beam in Octavia's eyes was palpable. Despite her mussed coat and disarrayed mane, she was unbelievably happy. 10 minutes later, the spell had been removed, and the room was waiting with bated breath. Then the white unicorn on the bed moved a little. A croaking groan escaped her cracked lips. The earth pony mare shot into view, gazing lovingly at the crimson eyes slowly revealing themselves. "I'm here, Vinyl." Her voice cracked with emotion. "I hurt like Buck in all the worst ways," the DJ whispered. She felt a muzzle pressing under her chin, and little wet spots hit her coat. "But you're alive," she heard Octavia say. The last remembered events rattled through her mind, and she lifted her not painful leg to hug the cellist. "Yeah, hard. Harder to get rid of than that." She wanted to laugh and cry and scream all at once, the memory of the world fading away as her left side burned with pain and blood soaked her fur. "Love you, Octavia Philharmonica," she mouthed out, the rumble of vocalization transferring to the sobbing gray mare buried against her. Octavia felt it against the blessed thumps of Vinyl's heartbeat. "I love you so, so much, you silly unicorn," she whispered. "Abby," she said a little louder. "Yes, love?" Octavia looked up, and Vinyl got a good view of her purple eyes, streaming with tears. Could you kiss it better?" She grinned her cheesiest grin. Octavia let out a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob before wrapping her lips around Vinyl's, peppering smaller pecks wherever she drew away. 6 months later. Early spring still held the chill of winter, the cold air prodding the scars on her lung with little icy knives. Vinyl winced and used her magic to tug the drawstrings of her charcoal-colored hoodie tighter. 2 gray hoofs slid over her from behind, guiding a blue-striped scarf around her neck and tying it up. Soft lips kissed the back of her ear, which twitched happily at the contact. "I think you'll still need this for a little while, Vi," Octavia said, lowering her front hoofs to the ground once more. "Looks like it." She smiled and glanced over at her lover. "But so long as you're still with me, I'll keep warm enough." She knew it was naff, uncool, and a little sappy. Once upon a time, she would have cringed at the others even suggesting such phrases. But after the fading, floating moment all those months ago, on a cold, unfeeling stage, Vinyl Scratch took every opportunity to tell her love just how much she meant to her. Octavia smiled and blushed, pressing a kiss to a white cheek. "I love you, Vinyl," she whispered as they set off again. The unicorn's stiff joint kept them slow, but the cellist followed the pace without complaint. After all, she was grateful to still have the mare close. The couple made their way through the streets, soon lost in a city crowd, heedless of the bustle so long as they were together.